Good evening and welcome to the Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals October 10th, 2024 meeting. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Brian Flynn.
Here.
Ellen McKay.
Here.
Andrew Romerdahl.
Here.
Travis Santo.
Here.
Brian Bennett.
Here.
Craig Bennett.
Here.
Dave Hale is excused absent. Do you have a quorum?
Next order of business are minutes. We have minutes for August 8th, 2024. Can I have a positive motion, please? Mr. Craig Bennett moved. Mr. Brian Bennett seconded. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Are there any objections to approval of the minutes? We're going to have to vote.
No.
We're going to call?
No.
Okay. All right.
There's no objection. There's no objection.
Are there any objections to approval of the minutes? Seeing and hearing none, the motion passes, and the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. Next order of business is disclosures. Are there any disclosures this evening? Mr. Romerdahl, do you have any disclosures?
I do not.
Mr. Santos, do you have any disclosures?
I do not.
Mr. Flynn, do you have any disclosures?
I do not.
Okay, hearing and seeing none, we shall continue. Next item is the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, there's a resolution for approval, Resolution 2024-009. Can I have a positive motion, please? Mr. Craig Bennett moves, Mr. Brian Bennett seconds. Does anyone want to remove this case from the consent agenda for discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Is there any objection to approval of the consent agenda? Do you want to do that? No? Hearing and seeing none, the consent agenda is approved by unanimous consent. Okay. Nothing, we don't have any appearance requests for this evening. No unfinished business. Nothing on the regular agenda, which moves us to public hearings. And we have one variance hearing this evening. For variance hearings, the procedure by which the public may speak to the board at this meeting is, after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for the applicant to state their case. The applicant, including all of his or her representatives, has 10 minutes for presentation and may reserve time for rebuttal at the end of the public hearing. Throughout the proceedings, the burden of proof rests upon the applicant, who must convince the board by a preponderance of evidence that the variance should be granted. A concurring vote of a majority of the fully constituted membership of the board, minus those excused by conflicts of interest, shall be required to grant a variance. For a variance to be granted, all 8 standards must be substantially met. On conclusion of the applicant's presentation, the board members and the staff may then direct questions to the applicant through the chair. The chair will then open the hearing for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify follow the time limits established in the rules of procedure. Representatives of groups such as community councils, PTAs, etc., have 5 minutes, and individuals have 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the board. You may only testify once on an issue unless questioned by the board. Time is kept by the secretary. The display at the front will be green to within 1 minute of the time allowed, then will turn yellow. At this time, you should begin to sum up your testimony. At the end of the time allowed, the light will turn red and a tone will sound. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals takes. The parties have 30 days from the date of mailing or other distribution of the decision to file an appeal to Superior Court. Okay. So the first case is case 2024-0091, and the petitioner are Casey and Kirsten Brogan. And will the staff please describe the notice given in this case?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on September 16th, 2024, a total of 124 public hearing notices were mailed in accordance with procedures of AMC 2103-02OH. As of the writing of this staff report, one public comment was received in support, and the Girdwood Board of Supervisors did not provide comments on this case.
Are there any objections to the sufficiency of notice in this case? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on. Will the staff please present the case?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a request for dimensional variances from dimensional standards Girdwood residential districts to allow the cabin closest to Higher Terrace Road to encroach 10 feet into the 20-foot front setback and minimum stream setback width per side to allow the same cabin to encroach a maximum of 7 feet into the 25-foot stream setback. The owners are looking at expanding vertically and add to the second floor. So this addition would allow an entrance to be constructed at grade with the existing right-of-way. This structure was constructed sometime in 1998 by previous owners before the current owners bought the property. The nonconforming determination established legal nonconforming rights for the stream setback. However, the existing structure built after 85 requires a variance for that front setback. And the addition of a second floor above the existing structure is recognized as an increase in the size to the existing nonconformity. So that's why we're here this evening. Reviewing agencies, there was no objections from even any of the reviewing agencies. Watershed Management Services commented that they don't have any problems with the granting of the variance. In the approval criteria, staff has found that criteria A for both variances the standard has been met. The parcel has a slope of 28%. That's roughly a property elevation difference ranging about 43 feet on average from the front to back. The unnamed stream starts in the southeast corner of the property at Higher Terrace and meanders in the northwest direction, bifurcating most of this parcel. Therefore, the steep slope and stream impact are extraordinary physical circumstances to the subject property. Staff finds standard B is met for both variance 1 and 2. The stream setback and property setbacks reduce the building area on this lot by more than 50%. Taking these factors into account along with the steep slope, the impact on this parcel creates an exceptional undue hardship on the property owner to build in any other location on the property. Staff finds condition C for both variances has been met. This hardship is not self-imposed. The variance to allow the addition of a second floor to the existing footprint does not merely constitute an inconvenience for the property owner. The property owner learned of this encroachment after they acquired a nonconformity determination in preparation of getting a building land use permit. Staff finds condition D is met for both variance 1 and 2. The addition of a second floor to the existing footprint will not adversely affect the use of adjacent properties. There have been no complaints from surrounding properties regarding the structure. Staff finds that condition E is met. These variances do not change the character of the zoning district, the GR2 zoning district specifically, for variance 1 and 2. Staff finds that condition F has been met for variance 1 and 2. These encroachments within the front setback and stream setback have no known impacts on the health, safety, or welfare of the people of the municipality to date. Standard G, we find that's been met as it is not applicable to single-family structures. Standard H has been met for both variance 1 and 2. So this is the minimum variance that will allow the property owner to retain the structure that has existed in the location since 1989, allowing them to add a second floor to that existing footprint without having to demolish or relocate it to meet all the setback requirements, which are marginalized on this property already. So therefore, the department finds that all 8 standards are met for both of the variances and recommends approval of the variances subject to the conditions found on page 5 of the staff packet. I'm here to answer any questions, and the petitioner and petitioner's representative is here tonight as well. Thank you.
Are there any questions of staff by the board?
There are, yes.
Mr. Brian Bennett.
I'd like to ask the staff, the last paragraph of your request and background says that in addition would be considered an intensification of the encroachments, which means that you're making a bad situation worse?
Through the chair, Mr. Bennett, so we've seen this before. So we've seen, for instance, we've seen people that have non-conforming rights for a structure that encroaches. However, they have a flat roof and they've done everything and they want to put a pitched roof on their property because of ice. Well, that as the municipality determines that as you're intensifying your into the setback, even though it's vertically. It's sometimes it is kind of hard to think about when you look at it. You're like, well, that doesn't quite make sense, but that's been the ruling of the way the municipality interprets it. So what we're asking here is, yes, they have a cabin, they have some non-conforming rights for it, but when you go to build a second story or a pitched roof or anything like that, within that envelope, if you do anything, you're considered. It needs an encroachment, a variance to an encroachment.
No, I'm not questioning the need for the variance. Can I move on to the findings, Part A?
Sure.
The last part of the state Supreme Court says that it distinguishes from other land in the general area, and yet in your last sentence you say that the circumstances are applicable to approximately 4 other properties in the same zoning district. And in the application they talk about 9 other properties in the neighborhood. I looked up the addresses and they're all adjacent to this property that are apparently in violation of the same code. Care to comment on that difference?
Well, let's see here. So I believe there exist exceptional or extraordinary physical circumstances of the subject property, including but not limited to streams, wetlands, or slope. And then the Alaska Supreme Court says peculiarities sufficient to warrant a grant of the variance must arise from the physical conditions of the land, which distinguish it from other land in the general area. However, I believe if we looked all across the GR2 zoning district, yes, there's 9, or we're saying 4 properties just adjacent. So those all kind of are extraordinary physical circumstances due to streams and wetlands. Not all the properties in the GR2 have streams running through them or 28% slopes. So we're saying this lot, and there is some around it, but that doesn't mean the general area.
I was trying to figure out what general means.
Yeah,
Among other words in there. Can I move on to the Part E?
Sure.
Part E, I believe, is a 3-part question. Doesn't change the characteristics of the zoning of the district, and does not permit a non-approved use, but you didn't address the intent. Care to address it now?
Let's see here. So we have, you're talking about does not change the character of the zoning district, so it's a single-family home.
No, I'm talking about in keeping with the intent of the code, the second part of the question.
So the intent of the code would be, it's a GR2, which is residential. And that's what they're continuing with, is a residential use. They're not proposing something different or even way more intense.
Well, that would be part of the third if they were proposing to use it under a different purpose than residential work. But the intent of the code for a residential area, do you think it meets the intent of the code for a residential area in Girdwood?
The plan, yes, staff does feel that this meets the intent of the code, is not changing the character, and it's not permitted to use, otherwise not permitted. Those do sort of overlap.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out. Can I move on to the recommendations?
Oh, sure.
You want the applicants to post addresses for the structure and request the stream mapping updates.
Stream, yep.
And why was that not requested to be done before the approval of the variance? Why wouldn't that be requested to be accomplished before the? Because if you if you have to look up the mapping situation for the streams and setbacks, the variance might have to be rewritten because it might not be the same distances and yardages. I don't know what the new maps would show, but wouldn't they be sort of necessary to know what the current status is when you're making an application for variance?
Well, I believe we should probably ask the petitioner's representative, because he was the one that would have talked to Watershed Management Services, Kyle Cunningham, which is page 29 of the staff report. He might have got some different information of them, or they felt at the time that it wasn't required to have that mapped before the variance was submitted. They definitely state that they're supportive of the variance to remain. So let's hear from the petitioner's representative on that question. I believe he has a little more insight.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm finished, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Are there any other questions of staff? Okay. Are there any questions of staff by the applicant? Okay. Then will the applicant or the applicant's representative please come forward and state and spell your name for the record? You need to turn the mic on. There you go. One more time.
That's it, yeah. First name Casey, C-A-S-E-Y. Last name Brogan, B as in boy, R-O-G-A-N.
Casey's the owner, and I'm the representative, Jeremy Hurst, H-U-R-S-T.
Please present the case.
Sure. Should I answer the question first, or should we come back to that?
No.
From Mr. Bennett?
Your presentation might answer my question.
Okay, sure, great. Yes, so the owners, Casey and Kirsten Brogan, have bought the property, as we stated here in the narrative here in, what was year of that again, Casey? 11. And as stated, when they purchased the property, were not made aware of the situation of the encroachments into the stream or front setback. This parcel is quite a steep parcel, as noted by the staff, which has really limited the constraints. Those constraints have limited any kind of redevelopment or moving of those existing structures. So that was one of the driving forces why we felt that the only option for the owner to improve the property was to obtain the variances. Just because it's fresh on my mind, I do want to bring up the issues of potential concerns with watershed and watershed mapping. I did speak with Kyle Cunningham, the head of watershed there with the municipality, about this property just a couple of days ago after he had made the staff recommendations, just so I could get some clarification from him on what kind of make sure I understand what he's looking for and the requirements for additional mapping. And what he clarified to me was that all he would like to do is get permission to enter the property so that he can confirm by visual inspection that the way we've mapped it here, that I have mapped it in the as-built survey that's in part of the packet, it is, he agrees with that. I've had other experiences working with Mr. Cunningham on other projects, and we do have a working relationship where he has worked off of my surveys in the past, and so I think that's why he feels confident that he's taking my survey at face value, but he will still want to come to take the visual inspection. And I asked if that was something he felt like he had to do prior to the approval of the potential approval of the variance, and he said no, that would not be necessary. His only concern was the existing mapping that the municipality currently has for that stream has that stream in a slightly different location. But he acknowledges that that mapping is pretty crude that was there previously, and that is definitely wasn't a surprise to him that it was in a slightly different place. But he also has the interest in updating the municipal mapping so that it does more properly reflect the actual conditions. So that's what he means in his requirements for the new mapping. So with that said, what the Brogans are trying to do is really they use this property as a second home. They have, as you see, there's 2 cabins on site. One of the cabin, they rent out to as a long-term rental to a Girdwood worker, yeah. And it's definitely the Brogans' desire to keep that available for workforce housing in Girdwood. But at the same time, they do have this property that they would also like to enjoy themselves. Because of some of Casey's limitations and some of his father-in-law's limitations, who also likes to come and enjoy the property as well, they feel like it's necessary to raise that cabin that they look to use.
Just to be fair, I'm not worried about my father-in-law, but my dad's grandfather was limited to a wheelchair for a long time and could not get out of his house. And so my dad, who's trying to help me out with making this work, he said, if you want to try and rebuild, then I'd like to have it be wheelchair accessible. So I'm trying to make it be wheelchair accessible. And that said, I'm legally blind, so it would make my life easier too if there was a ramp that's just straight across to second story.
All right, so we're really just trying to make the property usable, really, by the owners of the property, and still maintain this desire to
Yep.
offer workforce housing at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah, we feel like that the ask of the variance is not an extraordinary ask. It's an existing cabin in its existing location, and the footprint will not be changing. But I feel like that we've made a good case for how all of the conditions A through H, as we see it, have been met, and we are grateful that the staff recommendations seem to agree with that as well. I don't feel it's necessary to, I guess, belabor necessarily the details that I think are, pretty obvious here, but I definitely would like to, open this up if anyone else has any questions about this application. I'd like to open that up.
Okay, you have 4.5 minutes for rebuttal. Are there any questions of the applicant by the board members? Mr. Brian Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It says in the application that you have to apply for a right-of-way variance as well?
That's, we have to get a right-of-way permit for...
Or permit, I mean, excuse me.
Yes, for the walkway, yes.
For the walkway. And how does, I'm not sure how that has to proceed, or if it doesn't proceed, what are you going to do then?
Well, we would just have to adapt with the current conditions that are there. It would not be ideal, I'll say that. But I think it still will, the cabin would still be usable. It just would not be in an ideal circumstance. But I guess let me just also add that I've been given indications that in Girdwood, that those permits have been granted, I won't say freely, but if you have a case such as grade, which this property is affected by grade to this nature, that it sort of lends itself to a need versus a want, and that the right-of-way department has been accommodating, at least somewhat, on these.
Thank you. I have nothing more, Madam Chair.
Are there any questions of the applicant by staff?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone from the public wishing to testify in this case? Anyone at all? Okay. So, wasn't a lot of things to rebut, but does the staff have any rebuttal?
No, Madam Chair.
Does the applicant have anything additional? Okay. Then we'll close the public hearing and the matter rests with the board. May I have a positive motion, please? Going to get the little thing up here? Yep. It's good. Okay. Okay, Mr. Craig Bennett.
I move to approve the request for dimensional variance from 1 AMC 2109060, Table 2109-5, Table of Dimensional Standards, Girdwood Residential District, to allow a cabin, also known as Cabin 1, to encroach into the front setback, and 2 AMC 2107020B9, Table 2107-1, minimum stream setback width per side to allow a cabin, also known as Cabin 1, to encroach into required 25-foot stream setback, subject to conditions 1 through 6 on page 5 of the staff report.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Bennett seconds. It has been moved and seconded to grant a variance to allow a cabin, cabin number 1, to encroach into the front yard setback, and the same cabin to encroach into the required 25-foot stream setback, subject to conditions 1 through 6 on page 5, on page 5 of the staff report. Will Mr. Craig Bennett speak to the motion, please?
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to point out that there were no objections from any of the reviewing agencies. The department recommends approval, and the 28% steep slope does provide a challenge, and staff shows that all 8 of the standards shown are met, so I will be in support of this.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Bennett, would you speak to the motion, please?
I really have nothing to add to the motion, thank you, or its contents.
Is there any further discussion? Anyone not present like to say anything? Okay. If we're ready for the question is on the adoption of a motion to grant the variance to allow the cabin to encroach into the front yard setback and the stream setback. A yes vote will grant the variance, a no vote will deny the variance. Please vote.
Andrew Romerdale, how do you vote?
Yes.
Brian Flynn, how do you vote?
Yes.
Travis Santos, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
There are 6 votes in the affirmative. There are no votes in the negative. The variance has been granted. Go. Next item, reports. I don't have any. Secretary? Nothing from the secretary. We think probably we don't have a meeting next month. No committees? Any board member comments? No? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Brian Bennett moves. Mr. Craig Bennett seconds. We are adjourned.